Okay. Chapter summary. If you already know most of the stuff about this chapter, this is the learning approach, third chapter of AS level psychology. If you already know most of the stuff, this will be good because it's just a good old refresher. Has most of the generally useful stuff that you need to know, but you won't get all the specifics. So if you're just watching this and you don't know anything else, you're trolling. You gotta know the other stuff. However, it is very useful for coming up with this stuff, the similarities and differences. Even though you could theoretically come up with it by yourself on the day of the exam, it's nice to just have this in the back of your head and hear it at some point so that you can call upon it once you're asked the question. So let's start. The learning approach. So starting with Bandura et al. For aggression, the psychology investigated here is social learning theory and whether children would imitate aggression shown by a model. The aim was to investigate whether children imitate aggression of a model in the absence of the model and whether they are more likely to imitate a same-sex model. Procedure. Children observed either an aggressive or non-aggressive model playing in a room with toys or no model. The aggressive model displayed physical and verbal aggression towards an inflatable Bobo doll. The children were then made mildly frustrated, and their behavior in a new room with toys was observed through a one-way mirror. Results. The participants in the aggressive model condition demonstrated more physical and verbal aggression than other groups, and also boys are more likely to imitate physical aggression and be influenced by a same-sex model. Conclusion. Observing an aggressive model can lead to imitative aggression, particularly if the model is the same sex. Strengths. There are many controls, such as a script for the model and toy placement. Children were matched on prior aggressive levels across conditions. Weaknesses. Risk of psychological harm for the children who viewed the aggressive model. The act of watching an adult act aggressively towards an inflatable doll lacks mundane realism. Cool. Links to assumptions. Bandura et al. Found that children were likely to imitate the behavior of an aggressive model, showing that we learn through the process of social learning. Links to issues and debates. The study used young children who are at a sensitive age in their development. This increases the risk of psychological harm for those being exposed to an aggressive model. A real-life application is to reduce the quantity of violence shown on television, or to only show it late at night when children are not watching, due to the risk of imitation. Similarities. Both Bandura et al. And Fagan et al. Investigated how new behaviors can be learned. Both Bandura et al. And Saavedra and Silverman used children in their studies. Differences. Bandura et al. Used children as participants, while Fagan et al. Used animals. Bandura et al. Used multiple children in their study, while Saavedra and Silverman only used one. It was a case study, of course. And then we move on to Fagan et al. Elephant learning. The psychology investigated here, an investigation of how the principles of operant conditioning, including positive, negative, primary, and secondary reinforcement, can be used to improve elephant welfare. Elephants are taught a procedure called the trunk wash using shaping and chaining. Aim, to investigate whether secondary positive reinforcement could be used to train the elephants to voluntarily complete a trunk wash. Procedure. Elephants underwent training using secondary positive reinforcement to complete each of the 5 steps involved in the trunk wash. Elephants were trained using capturing, luring, shaping, and secondary reinforcers. Each training session was observed with the details of the session and success rate recorded. Results. The 4 juvenile elephants all learned the full trunk wash in 25 to 35 sessions. The older elephant failed to learn the full sequence of the trunk wash in the time available. Conclusion. Secondary positive reinforcement is effective for training juvenile, traditionally trained elephants to voluntarily participate in a trunk wash. Strengths. A behavioral checklist was used, which increased the reliability of observations. The captive elephants were observed in their normal setting. Weaknesses. The elephants were observed by their trainers, which was subjective. A very small sample of 5 female elephants was used. Links to assumptions. Elephants were able to learn a new behavior by using a stimulus response model, showing that experiences shape behavior, and these changes are directly observable. Links to issues and debates. One elephant was not able to successfully learn the trunk wash, which may have been due to an individual explanation for behavior as she was older. A real-life application of the research is improvement in captive animal welfare, as it was shown that positive methods of behavioral shaping could be used to support the elephants in important health checks. Then we go on to similarities. Both Fagan et al. And Bandura et al. used structured observations. Both Fagan et al. And Saavedra and Silverman had small sample sizes. Differences. Fagan et al. Studied elephants in their normal environment, while Bandura et al. Used a laboratory setting. Fagan et al. Used female elephants as participants, while Saavedra and Silverman used a male participant. Then we move on to Saavedra and Silverman. The last one, button phobia. The psychology investigated here was a boy who had developed a phobia through evaluative learning, was treated using principles from operant conditioning and classical conditioning. The aim was to test the effectiveness of imagery exposure as part of an exposure-based cognitive behavioral treatment for a phobia of buttons. The procedure, a boy was assessed for a phobia of buttons. He underwent 4 exposure-based treatment sessions followed by 7 sessions of disgust-related imagery exposure. The efficacy of the treatment was measured immediately afterwards and again 6 and 12 months later. Results. Following behavioral exposure, the boy could tolerate more buttons, but distress ratings increased. Following disgust-related imagery exposure for buttons, subjective ratings of distress on the fear thermometer decreased, and the boy no longer met the diagnostic criteria for a phobia. Nice. Conclusion. Image exposure therapy may be a more effective treatment for disgust-based phobias than exposure-based treatments. Strengths. The follow-up data at 6 and 12 months showed long-lasting effects for imagery exposure therapy. In-depth data was collected through triangulation of observations and self-report data. Weaknesses. Replication is difficult due to using a case study method, and there was a single participant, so generalizations are difficult. Links to assumptions. The boy successfully learned not to fear buttons through a treatment based on operant and classical conditioning. This shows that we learn through these processes. Links to issues and debates. The child was 9 years old, so the researchers used a specially adapted version of the anxiety disorders interview schedule for the DSM-IV, suitable for children, and the feelings thermometer was used to measure distress in a more child-friendly way. I don't know why I read that sentence like a crazy person, but I did. Sorry. A real-life application is to consider incorporating image exposure therapy when the aversive stimulus is harmless and unthreatening. Sorry, I was cracking my apples. Similarities. Both Saavedra and Silverman and Bander et al. Collected quantitative data. Both Saavedra and Silverman and Fagan et al. Were attempting to deliberately change/shape behavior. Jesus. Differences. Saavedra and Silverman collected self-report data, while Bandura et al. Did not. Saavedra and Silverman used a case study as their main research method, while Fagan et al. Used an observation. The end. Thank you for watching.